Hello and welcome to my channel. Today's a beautiful day and I figured I'd come and just talk a little bit about retirement, in fact, retirement lies. And if you can see, got my pickleball shirt on. I'm a pickleball king. But anyway, to get started, I believed a lie about retirement. Actually, I believed several of them. And the thing about lies is they don't always sound or feel like lies when you hear them. They sound reasonable and they sound like common sense. They sound like something a smart, prepared person would believe. And then retirement shows up and the lie gets exposed, and you're standing there wondering why the plan that made perfect sense on paper feels so different in real life. Well, today we're going to talk about the lies, not to shame anybody who believe them, because I believe them myself. The first step to building a retirement that actually works is to tell the truth about the ones that don't. Hello again, and I am Quentin Moore. This is Health, Wellness, and Community, and today's title is The Lie We Tell Ourselves About Retirement. The lies we tell ourselves about retirement. Let's get into it. These aren't lies that somebody tells you. These are lies that we arrive at on our own, built from assumptions. And they're built from watching other people retire. They're built from the culture around the work and rest, environment, if that's the right word. And nobody actually sat you down and sold you these. You absorbed them over time and over decades, in fact. And that's what makes them hard to spot. They feel like your own thinking, but when you examine them against actual lived experience of retirement, they fall apart, every single one of them. And today there are 5 of them that I want to talk about. Let's go through them one by one and we'll discuss them, and I'll talk about my experience with them and a little bit on what I've read over the years about each of these lies. Lie number 1, I'll finally have time to do everything I've been putting off. Believe that if you want to. But the truth is, you'll have the time, but you won't automatically have the energy, the motivation, the structure, or the identity to fill it. And time without direction, it's not freedom, it's adrift. The to-do list that you built during the career, it doesn't magically get done in retirement. In fact, most of it doesn't get done at all, because the urgency that was pushing, it's gone. The urgency that was pushing you, which was the job, it's no longer there. What was on your list that you thought retirement would finally make happen? When I look at it, I had a whole list. I was going to get serious about my health and really commit to a training routine. I was going to write a book I'd been putting off for years. I was going to travel more, spend more time with family, get deeper into my faith practice, build the podcast into something real. I had this picture in my head of a retired version of me who was doing all of that. I was doing all of that because I'd have the time. And that list was long. I was confident. I'd been disciplined my whole career, and this was the only thing standing between me and all of it. So How much of it actually happened? And I'm going to be honest with you. Here's the honest answer. Some of it happened. The training routine eventually clicked. The podcast became HWC, Health, Wellness, and Community, which you're listening to right now. But the book, it's still in progress. The travel, less than I pictured, and a lot of the things that I thought I'd do, they just didn't happen. Not because I got lazy, but because I discovered something I wasn't expecting. And that was having the time didn't automatically give me the energy, the focus, or the reason to do it. I'd built my whole career around a structure that told me what mattered and when that structure left, I had to learn how to generate that from the inside. And that took a longer amount of time than I thought it would. What I discovered is that time isn't the bottleneck. Purpose and structure are. What do you mean? Well, what I figured out, and it took me a while to actually clearly name it, is that my career wasn't just giving me a job, it was giving me a framework. It told me when to show up, what mattered, what was urgent, and who needed me. When the career ended, none of that transferred automatically. The time was there. Everything else had to be rebuilt from scratch. And until I rebuilt it, the list just sat there. I'd look at it, it'd look at me. I'd think about it, I guess it was thinking about me. And then I'd find something else to do. And that happened quite often, especially when I didn't have that structure in place. Nothing was pulling me toward the way the mission used to, if that makes sense. Now, lie number 2 is I'll be happy because I'll finally be free. The truth is that freedom without direction feels less like liberation and more like floating. Research shows us that the first 12 to 24 months of retirement is where somebody is at highest risk for depression, anxiety, social isolation. And it's not because retirement is bad, because freedom without structure and purpose is disorienting to some people, a lot of people. And it's disorienting for the brain, which spent decades inside a system that told it where to be and why. And this alone is the one that it surprises people the most. They expect the happiness. They didn't expect the hollow feeling. And when you look at it, the research is clear. Retirees who don't replace the structure and purpose of the career, they report significantly lower life satisfaction in the first 1 to 2 years of retirement. Another lie would be happiness is the automatic result of not having the work. Not really. The truth in that matter is that happiness in retirement is constructed, and it's not inherited. You build it or you don't have it. This is exactly what I have a series, and you all will continue to hear me talk about it. I'm in the process of writing and recording, like now, a series called the Retire Right series. And the Retire Right series is built around that happiness in this season. And it takes intention and puts it in place in your retirement. It helps you be more intentional during your retirement, which helps with your purpose and your mission and developing happiness as well. Let's move on to lie number 3. Lie number 3 is my relationships will take care of themselves. It says that your relationships will take care of themselves now that you have more time. The truth is that time doesn't fix relationships. You know, it reveals them. The problems that existed during the career, they don't disappear in retirement. They become even more visible, I dare to say, because the job is no longer there to provide a distraction, to provide structure and a built-in excuse. The job's not there to do that. And when you look at it, it gives you an excuse not to deal with it. But since we're talking about relationships, the marriage, the friendships, the family dynamics, you know, they all come into sharper focus. And that can be a beautiful thing, or it can be hard depending on what was actually there. In fact, one study found that it's not being retired, but becoming retired that is most stressful for marriages. And I was glad that I ran over that article actually before I retired, and it helped me out in understanding that, not being retired but becoming retired. It helped me know that I needed to share my thoughts and things with my spouse, and so we done that. And when you look at it, the couples who thrive, they're the ones who talked about the transition, and they talked about it explicitly, and they talked about it early. And the ones who assumed it would just work out are the ones who ended up in friction, you know, that they didn't see coming. Retirement, it gives you proximity. Proximity without intention, it's not the same as connection. So far, we've gone over 3 of the lies. I want to ask you a question. Which of the first 3 lies have hit home for you? I want you to drop it in the comments, and I want to know which one you believed is the hardest, because I have a feeling that most people in the room believed all 3 lies. That's just my feeling, but I want to know. Drop it in the comments. Moving on to number 4. I have plenty of time, and I'll figure it out when I get there. And don't do that. You'll be stepping in a bear trap. I guarantee it. Don't do that. The truth is, the most expensive lie on the list is this right here. If you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. If that makes sense. If you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. I think I said that right. I might not have. If I said it wrong, just drop it in the comments and we'll talk about it. And when you look at it, because the evidence is clear. Retirees who don't plan the emotional, the social, and the purpose dimensions of retirement before they leave, they report significantly worse outcomes in the first 2 years than those who do. You plan the finance years in advance, and then you don't get to wait until you retire to plan the life. And by the time you realize you needed a plan, you're already inside the problem. And I've seen it. I've seen people come in my clinic for their annual physical 6 months after retirement, and the signs, they're already showing. They're already showing. I see the weight gain, the sleep changes, the low-grade flatness that shows up on their face even when they say everything is fine. You know, just because they say everything is fine and doesn't mean it is, because they'll be frowning big time and saying, oh, it's fine. No, it's not. So then I got to pull out my little shovel and dig a little bit more into the situation to see what's going on. And a lot of times it is retirement and some confusion about different components of retirement. And so when I ask, come to find out, they retired. And when I asked if they had a plan for the transition, almost nobody did. Almost nobody did. And planning the money, it's not the same as planning the life. And most people only do one of these two. They either plan the life component of it or they plan the financial part, but they never think of both of them. And so that's something that I'm trying to get you all to do. That's something that I started doing, and it made things go a lot smoother for me. Moving on, lie number 5. Lie number 5 is, once I retire, I'll finally be able to rest. I don't believe that either. The truth is, rest sounds like the goal, but the research on human psychology and the lived experience of almost every retiree I've ever talked to says that sustained rest without contribution leads to deterioration, not restoration. Did you hear that? It leads to deterioration, not restoration. You weren't built to stop. The human body is not built to stop. You were built to shift. The goal isn't permanent vacation. The goal is the work that you choose at a pace that you control. Because after you retire, a lot of times now, you're on your time. You're not on somebody else's time. And you control that. You control that in so many different ways. And you control it in a direction that matters to you. And that isn't rest. That's the best version of work, and it's worth building. If that makes sense. It's not rest, it's the best version of work, and it's worth building. This is the one that gets to the heart of the whole series. Rest is real and rest is necessary. Permanent rest isn't the goal. The people who thrive in retirement aren't the ones who stopped, okay? They're the ones who redirected. The person who became a mentor, the officer who becomes a professor, the nurse who becomes a community health advocate. They didn't stop working. They stopped working for someone else's mission and started working for their own. They took the things that were valuable to them and implemented them into their lives so that they had more meaning to them. And that distinction is everything. So here's where I land after going through all 5. Here's where I land. The lies aren't stupid. They're definitely understandable. They come from a culture that treats retirement as the finish line, and the rest component is a prize. And when you've been running hard for 20 or 30 years, that sounds like exactly what you need. But the finish line isn't the destination. It's a transition point. And on the other side of it isn't a permanent vacation. It's a new season that requires just as much intention, just as much planning, and just as much honest examination as the season that just ended. The people who thrive in retirement aren't the ones who believe the lies. They're the ones who saw through them, and they saw through them early. And they saw through them early enough to build something real on the other side. You're watching this. That means that you're already ahead of the people who aren't asking these questions. So use that advantage and stop waiting for the lie to become true. Start building what's actually there. Also, if any one of those 5 hit home, drop a comment down below and tell me which lie you believed in the longest. And if you're watching this before you retire, share it with somebody who needs to hear it before they get to this point and they get on the other side and find out the hard way. So again, with all that, I want to thank you for your time. I ask that you consider liking and subscribing this video. We'd love to have you. And with all of that being said, we out. Peace.